Hey, before we start, I have a quick question for you. Imagine you walk into a supermarket today. You grab a bag of salt, maybe 500 grams. How much does it cost? 50 cents? $1? Maybe 2? Now imagine the government looks at that bag of salt and says, "Great, you owe us 20 times the price of that." Yeah, 20 times. You'd probably say, "That is absolutely crazy." And you'd be right. But this is exactly what happened in France for over 600 years. There was a brutal, unfair law, and every person had to buy a certain amount of salt every year, and they had to pay a very high price for it. So here's my question for you today, and we're going to answer it together by the end of this video. What on earth made salt so incredibly expensive in France for 600 years? Let's find out. Okay, first, let's go back in time. Medieval France. It's the year 1300. No electricity, no refrigerator, no freezer. You just caught a big fish. Now what? If you do nothing, that fish will smell terrible in 2 days. It can actually make you sick if you eat it. But if you rub salt all over it, that fish can last for weeks, maybe months. Salt didn't just make food taste better, it stopped food from rotting. Salt preserved fish, meat, vegetables, everything. Soldiers needed it to carry food on long trips. Farmers needed it to survive the winter. Sailors needed it to cross the ocean. Salt was the internet of the Middle Ages. Everyone needed it. And because people needed it so much, kings noticed. Picture King Philip IV of France. It's around 1300. He's sitting in his fancy palace, and he has a big problem. He needs money. Lots of it. Wars are expensive. Castles are expensive. Being a king is honestly very expensive. He looks around his kingdom. He thinks, what does every person in France need? What can I tax that nobody can say no to? And then he suddenly realizes it. Salt. They all need salt. Rich people, poor people, farmers, everyone. They can't make it at home. They have to buy it from me. Brilliant. Terrible, but brilliant. So in 1341, the law was born. It had a name, La Gabelle, the salt tax. And it wasn't just a simple tax. Under the Gabelle, the government controlled all the salt in France. You could only buy salt from the government. The price? Completely set by the king. And every person above the age of 8, yes, 8-year-old children included, had to buy a minimum amount of salt each year, whether they needed it or not. But the price of salt wasn't the same everywhere in France. Depending on where you lived, you might pay completely different prices for the exact same salt. Some regions paid almost nothing. Others, they paid up to 14 times more for the same product. Imagine your neighbor pays $1 for salt. You pay $14 for the same salt, same white crystals. Why is my salt 14 times more expensive? Because that's where you live. Goodbye. Of course, people tried to cheat the system. They tried to break the rules and not pay the tax. Farmers would hide salt in their boots and carry it across regional borders. Fishermen would hide salt under their nets. Parents even hid small bags of salt in their children's coats. And the government? They hired salt inspectors, whose entire job was to go around, search people's houses, and check if you had too much salt. If they found illegal salt in your home, you could go to prison. For a wealthy French family, paying the salt tax was annoying, like a parking ticket. Unpleasant, but fine. For a poor farming family, the salt tax could take up to half of their income. Half. Gone. On salt. Everyone had to pay the tax, but the king, the nobles, the church, they didn't have to pay at all. And it did make people angry. Very, very, very angry. The Gabelle became one of the things that pushed people closer to the French Revolution of 1789. The National Assembly removed the Gabelle in 1790. After almost 450 years, it was gone. Well, almost. Napoleon brought it back a few years later because he needed money for his wars too. But finally, in 1945, after World War II, France removed the last traces of the salt tax forever. 600 years. That's how long it lasted. So, remember the question I asked you at the very beginning. What made salt so incredibly expensive in France for 600 years? Here's your answer. It wasn't the salt itself. Salt was never rare. The ocean is full of it. What made salt expensive was power. A government that saw something everyone needs, something you cannot live without, and decided, we will control this. We will set the price, and you will pay for it, or you will go to prison. Salt became expensive because some people made it expensive, on purpose. And that's a lesson that goes way beyond salt. Pretty heavy stuff for a seasoning, right?